866-509-7268. Joining us now, the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He's the author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. We'll talk about ISIS. Then I want to get into, brave men like Dr. Jasser recently faced some crap because he's been critical of Hamas over the years. We'll get that story. But first, we'll talk about the speech last night. How you doing, Dr. Jasser?
It's great to be with you, Dennis. Thanks for having me.
What'd you make of the chat fest last night, my friend?
Well, it's we'll take whatever we'll get at this point. It was actually refreshing to hear the president talk about American exceptionalism and talk about actually doing something, that America can do something. I'll tell you, as a Muslim, what was an out-of-body experience was watching the president. I get attacked by other Muslims as not being a good Muslim and not being Muslim, and that's
right.
Takfirism. The declaration of another Muslim as not a Muslim.
Right.
I was hearing my new name for President Obama is the Takfiri in chief. He's telling us who's Muslim and who's not. And to say that the ISIS is not Islamic is, they're not our Islam, but to deny that the Saudi ideology of Wahhabism isn't feeding that, and that the Islamic states that he was saying our allies are not feeding the same ideology that creates these monsters is just absurd, and it denies the fix against that ideology that he said is part of his great 4-point plan. So there was a huge disconnect in that whole thing.
Well, he had to build some something into the speech that would make it equivocative, quite frankly. Zuhdi, when I think of you, you must catch the same heat from other more radical and pissy Muslim groups that say, a black guy who goes off the grid would catch in the way of Uncle Tom stuff. What did you call it? What was the word that you just used?
Takfirism. It's, the most extreme is like when Al-Qaeda calls the, non-violent folks non-Muslims. And, in some form or other, all the theocrats want to say that us moderate liberal Muslims are not Muslims, and they're saying that we're kuffar, we're infidels, and it's called takfir. And the president seems to now be the Pope for Islam to tell us what is and what is not Islam. And that's all well and good, but it actually is a huge obstacle to the 12-step program for reform that we need, and it's denial that he's providing. Yeah,
it must be frustrating, Zuhdi. I know that you recently tasted it up close and personal. Tell me about this experience with the local imam in Phoenix. What's his name? Yasser Ali?
Well, we wrote about it publicly because when people say where are the moderate voices, we've avoided, my kids are 12, 10, and 6, and we attend mosque regularly. They're taking Quran school, and we helped this mosque grow. So we sort of kept all the politics away from them. And sure enough, we went to the end of Ramadan sermon, as we usually do. And the end of his sermon was about Muslims within us who are working against us, but not one of us.
Wow.
Everybody quickly knew he was talking about me, and they were very upset, the imam was, because a few days earlier, I had been on Fox criticizing Hamas and saying that the Palestinians don't deserve warmongers like that. And I actually view that as a very pro-Muslim position, but the Islamists and the Brotherhood groups demagogue it as being anti-Muslim because they don't want to deal with the realities of Islamism and its radicalism. And the way that, you realize we're successful when they're coming into my own backyard. And my family left there very upset. We're not going to surrender to them in our own mosque. And we went public, and since then, they've been backtracking, trying to say he wasn't talking about me, but yet after the sermon, there was chat rooms here locally where 80 to 100 different Muslims were saying they should have a petition preventing me from going to mosque, and it was clear to not only my allies but my enemies that he was talking about me. So since that was published, they've backtracked, and I think it was very helpful to get the antiseptic of sunlight onto it.
Well, I always hear about how, radical jihadist Muslims will be done in by the good Muslim community. I assume that when they singled you out, if not by name and every other way in your mosque, that there was a huge hue and cry against the guy doing that, right? Did they all come to your rescue, or were they reticent even in that regard?
Well, not immediately. Many of my friends came up to me and said that was really inappropriate, and we're sorry he did that, and we're going to look into it. But they didn't say anything on that day. Wow. But then when they saw my editorial 3 weeks later, they realized that this needs to be addressed. And, many of them have complained to the board of the mosque. And, we've lost some control of that mosque to the Council on American Islamic Relations, allies, and others. But this isn't this is one battle among many that we're fighting against the Islamist movements, and it's a battle within Islam. And I hope Americans start to realize that they need to take sides in this, because the majority of Muslims aren't with these groups, and we're fighting it on many different fronts.
Let me ask you more of an existential question, Zuhdi. If I'm assured, and how many Muslims are there in the world? Is it 1.5 billion?
Yep, 1.6 billion.
All right, 1.6. If I'm assured that, I don't know, let's say a couple 100,000 of them are nutters and the rest aren't, and that they'll have to eventually tighten it up by maybe declaring a fatwa on the jihadists within their own organization. If they never do that, can they still continue to say that they're actively against it? Or do they have to act at some point?
They have to act.
And if they don't, we can
silent Germans,
yes,
against Nazism, and they haven't.
Well, that's why you got cojones, Zuhdi, because you can't get people to say that. But I always say, boy, you can tell me all you want intellectually that they're all sitting out there and they're good people and they don't approve of this. But if they don't ever act, I admire you for having the cojones to say that at some point proving that involves acting about it. And we'll see. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's, really what we have. And we can't just condemn the violence. It's sort of like the alcoholics who hand around the bottle and say, oh, no, we're dealing with drunk driving. We take away their keys. You want to stop the drunk driving, you deal with the ideology. The bottle is political Islam, the ideas of Christians getting attacked, their rights coming from the Islamic State. And it's not just that Islamic State, it's all Islamic states that need to be defeated, and only Muslims can do that.
Boy, I can't tell you how much I admire you, sir. I mean, really, I know you would never say it because good men don't ascribe this to themselves, but you're a great man. Your kids and your wife and indeed men like me who brush up against you, you're a very admirable man, my friend. Now tell me about this event you've attended this morning for the Military Assistant Mission. Where was it at? Chase Field? Is that where the D-backs play?
Yeah, it was at Chase Field, and it is, I can't tell you how many tears come to your eyes listening to stories of soldiers that their regular pay is at the poverty level, and their families are suffering while they're serving. They come back, they're disabled. The system doesn't help them, and organizations like this really help support their families. And, you realize that why we serve. And service is not just the time that you're in service, but it's afterwards. And sometimes we abandon, not sometimes, too often, we abandon our troops after they've served. And having served myself, I drop everything I can to continue to help these types of groups. Does
their Military Assistance Mission have a website, Zuhdi, that anybody who's so predisposed could go over and help out a little?
Yes, Military Assistance Mission. Boy, you caught me. Here's their website. It is...
Take your time.
azmam.org. azmam.org.
AZMAM, the Arizona Military Assistance Mission, azmam.org. Org, note the org. You can follow Dr. Jasser on Twitter at Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. That name is spelled Zuhdijasser. I couldn't be more impressed by a human being, Dr. Jasser. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dennis. And all our work is like a tree falling in a forest without you. So thank you. Thanks for your time.